Welcome back to the Road to National series. In today's episode, I'm going to take you through a dynamic effort lower workout, and later in the video, I'm going to be talking to you about technique and bracing. But first, this is me doing my dynamic effort deadlifts for the week. So in this 3-week cycle, my dynamic effort lower days are deadlifts, and next cycle it will be squats. This is week 2 into the 3-week cycle, so I've got 3 sets of 5 programmed at 85% total 1 rep max. 48% of that is coming from the bar weight and 37% from the band tension. And whilst I was doing these, I wasn't quite sort of aggressively attacking it as much as I normally do in dynamic effort, and that is because I was really trying to focus on my deadlift technique, because my deadlift technique is very poor. I particularly took note of this earlier in the week when I did a deadlift max effort. If you want to go and check that video out, it highlights really well how bad my deadlift technique is, and I think that's just because naturally I was very strong at the deadlift. My first ever fully maxed out deadlift was 240 kilos or 530 pounds, but it was just grip and rip, and I've sort of only done that since, and it's developed great strength off the floor. I can break 300 kilos over my knees, but I can only fully deadlift 270 kilos. So I think that is a massive positional and technical error. So that is something that I'm really trying to work on, and I do think my deadlifts look better this week. I was trying to keep my chest up in the starting position and stop that sort of hitching and bad lockout form. So I was happy with those dynamic deadlifts. Now, moving on to the accessories. The first accessory here is belt squats. I was able to go up to 150 kilos, as you can see, and that is joint with the heaviest I've ever gone on these, so I was very happy with that, particularly since I've been working through a knee injury, and that did not bother me at all. I was just working my quads here, and my knee felt great, so I was very happy with that. After these, I go on to do hamstring curls, then single leg seated calf raises. Now, I don't have a seated calf raise machine. I used my quad extension machine as a seated calf raise machine. If you don't know how to do that, stick around in the video and you'll see later. It is a bit of a pain to set up. You'll see me absolutely wrestling to get it into the starting position, and it's more ideal if you've got a friend to help you lift up the quad extension to the top position. That's basically what you do for the seated calf raise. You'll see what I mean later, but whilst it's a nightmare to set up, it is fantastic and really does feel like a proper seated calf raise machine. And if you've got a small gym like mine, or you don't have a seated calf raise machine in your gym, it's a great substitute. After them, I then went on to do roller hip adductions. Tried to go as deep as possible, so I only did sets of 4 when normally I've been doing sort of sets of 8 to 10, but I went so deep. Honestly, I'm like almost all the way down into the splits. Very happy with the progress in terms of how deep I can go now, and I do feel my adductors getting much stronger. And then I ended the session off with reverse hypers. I went heavy on these as well, and it absolutely lit up my lower back and glutes, so I was very happy with those. So overall, a successful session, and whilst those accessories are playing in the background, I'm going to talk to you about technique and bracing. So the first thing I'm going to do is define what technique is, because sometimes people see it as sort of a nebulous thing. Is it controlling the weights really slowly? Is it having a flat back when you're deadlifting? What actually is good technique? Well, good technique when it comes to lifting the most weight possible, like in powerlifting, can be described as optimizing the way that the loads of the weight are placed onto your body, given your leverages, your muscle insertion, and your natural strong points. So what that means is that technique is a very personal thing. Some good technique ideas won't be applicable to you, and if you're watching videos of like expert coaches correcting some other lifters' form or technique, that might not be applicable to you, particularly in the lifts like the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. It is very personal, and the reason is, if we take the squat for example, what I have just defined technique as, optimizing the way the load is placed on your body, is trying to find the best way to apply the load from your squat onto your body, basically. So that will be very different. If you have a short spine and long femurs, you might have to do like a low bar style squat, and you might be very pitched forward, like your back might be leaning very far forward because of the length of your femurs and the shortness of your spine when you squat. So what is good technique to you might be trying to send your hips very far back as well as your knees very far over your toes to create a sort of general squat in a low bar position. That might be optimal technique for you to move the most amount of weight. And obviously there's probably some sort of criteria you have to hit. In powerlifting, your hip crease has to go below your knee, so it has to hit the standards for a squat, but that might be your optimal technique within those rule sets. However, if you are like the Chinese weightlifters, for instance, and they're the other way round with a long spine and short femurs, they can go high bar and they can keep very upright in their squats, just have loads of dorsiflexion, just send their knees over their toes. They don't need to send their hips back at all almost. They can keep their spines almost completely vertical, and they're like a pneumatic press. They can just go up and down and press the weight straight up. That might be optimal technique for them. So technique is very personal, dependent on your leverages. It's also dependent on your insertions and natural strength points. So to take the bench for example, if you have great pec insertions, your chest inserts very far along your humerus, your upper arm, and you have these big, strong, bulbous pecs, doing a wide grip bench press is probably going to be very beneficial to you because that is applying a lot of pressure to your pecs, and they're going to be a primary mover in your bench press. However, for someone like me who has the other situation, my pecs are terrible and are much weaker than my triceps, a closer grip style bench press is actually better for me to move more weight, even though it's a longer range of motion. So when people describe to you what they think good technique for a lift is, the main takeaway you have to have is that is not the same for everyone, and you need to experiment and maybe hire a coach or an expert just to give you some pointers of what optimal technique for you is, because it is very personal. The next thing to say is that I do think that in some cases the form police have gone completely over the top. For example, the idea that you need to do slow eccentrics all the time, even if you're like deadlifting, you need to like gently lower the weight, or your back needs to be straight in a deadlift. Let me tell you something. The top 1,000 deadlifts of all time, all of them have been done with a slightly rounded back. Having a slightly rounded back is not bad form. I think often people use form as a coping strategy. People who are maybe less strong and then lift with really strict form, that's fantastic. I have nothing against that. And when you're doing accessories, by the way, I think you should try and be as strict as possible, and then maybe as you approach failure, you can, shift yourself back a bit when doing lat pull downs just to eke out a few extra reps. That's fine. But in general, you should seek to lift really strictly, because what you're trying to do is apply the tension completely to your muscles and overload those. That is when you're doing bodybuilding or your accessories in powerlifting. However, when it comes to the actual main lifts of your sport, the compound lifts, and trying to move the most amount of weight, you are not automatically going to die if your spine rounds a bit. That actually might help you in terms of it might lessen the range of motion, particularly if you extend your arms and allow your scapula to like come forward a bit. That will cut the range of motion. You allow your shoulders to come forward, you round your back a little bit, that might put you in a more optimal position. And as long as the angle of your back isn't changing through the deadlift, you will be fine. If you are driving into the floor with your legs, your hips are coming up in the deadlift, your back is rounding more and the bar isn't moving, that is bad, because that means the force from your leg drive into the ground is pushing your hips up, but it's not getting transferred through your back, down your arms and into the bar. It's just getting dissipated in the back. So that is going to hurt your back. So that is bad. But having a slightly rounded back, don't worry. Optimal technique, you need to experiment and find out what is optimal for you. The last thing I'll say is about bracing. Bracing is something that is essential for all lifters on all lifts. It's trying to make your torso one solid platform, because we have this amazing thing called a spine, which is very articulate, but when we're wanting to lift the most weight, we want it to become one solid block. So to brace, you basically take in as much air as possible, push out as hard as you can, as if a basketball is being blown up in your stomach, and that will make your torso one big solid block. It'll connect your rib cage to your hips. So that is it for today's video. I hope you did in fact enjoy the video. If you did, drop it a like, drop it a comment, subscribe, click the bell, all of that good stuff, and have a great day.